This series feels like it is flying by. But as always, thanks friends for the support and subscriptions. We're growing at such a great rate. Soon we will have the Patreon up and our new content from my trip to Gettysburg and Antietam, so I can show you all the sites in person. So compared to usual, the accompanying episodes about George Hooker will not be tomorrow. It'll be on Monday. But today we will discuss his time as commander of the Army of the Potomac. He will be the second shortest time in command, only 5 months, but he also will be the person to implement the Corps badges and colors. He also would become infamous for allowing prostitutes to follow the army in a way to help the men's morale. These women would become known as hookers. But let's begin talking about Fighting Joe Hooker's plan. Hooker was officially made commander of the Army of the Potomac on January 26, 1863. He was a major opponent of McClellan's cronies, so to speak, so this is one reason people like him and Burnside did not get along at all. So he kept an eye on them, but also was celebrated by the army and the northern public. Hooker had become renowned as a great field commander and an aggressive one at that. So this was a change from the overly cautious McClellan and the lapdog of Burnside. In the early spring of 1863, he created many reforms, starting, of course, with the Army's dietary distributions, and then commissary reforms, camp sanitation reforms, establishing the Bureau of Military Intelligence, or BMI, an extremely early version of the CIA. He would also bring in quartermaster reforms and many hospital reforms, making it a safer place than it had been earlier years of the war. And of course, as I mentioned before, the implementation of the Corps badge. This was for many reasons and was actually a suggestion from his chief of staff, Dan Butterfield. The idea was it would make easier for not only units, but the commanders to identify who and where they were. So for example, the 1st Division of a Corps, the badge would be red. Then the 2nd Division would be white. And then the 3rd would be blue. The division commanders would carry standards with the Corps emblem on it, as well as the color for which division they were in, depending on which corps it was. And then the Corps commander would have a white cross on a blue field with the number of the corps within it. It was also a source of a new morale for the soldiers. Now the enemy would know who they were fighting, and they could hold pride in whatever their badge was. This helped in Hooker's reorganization of the army. Both Grand Division commanders would in fact resign, refusing to serve under Hooker, that being Sumner and Franklin. He would approve the transfer of Burnside's 9th Corps away, and then appoint political ally Dan Butterfield as his chief of staff, and another political ally, the acquitted murderer Dan Sickles, as the commander of the 3rd Corps. Through the winter and spring of 1863, many soldiers referred to Hooker's headquarters at Falmouth as a barroom and brothel. Now, Hooker probably had the most promising campaign. It actually looked very similar to Burnside's plan that would become the Mud March, but it added another phase. So he will take a piece of the Army of the Potomac and threaten Fredericksburg, pinning down the Confederate forces there. Then his cavalry corps will flank deep south and begin to disrupt southern infrastructure and even threaten to hit Richmond itself. Meanwhile, Hooker and the main army would actually surround and destroy Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia. The plan was flawless as well, and he did not have to rely on the engineer corps as Burnside had. The only issue was a single man, Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Jackson had spies and scouts throughout Northern Virginia, mainly because he was a Northern Virginian. So Lee had a general understanding of the situation. Jackson devised a tactic to stop the Union in their steps. The opening fight began when the cavalry corps was sent out to begin the first phase of the attack. General Sedgwick and Reynolds would move their 1st and 6th Corps across the Rappahannock. Facing them was General Jubal Early's divisions, would sit and watch the 2 corps, holding the heights beyond Fredericksburg. Now General Longstreet was split, so he only had General McLaws and Anderson's division, so they would be a diversion on May 1st, 1863, pulling from the Wilderness Slocum's 12th Corps and Meade's 5th Corps. Hooker would order Sickles and the 3rd Corps, Couch and the 2nd Corps to Chancellorsville House to support the 12th and 5th. From what he can tell, everything is working in his favor, and he will be enveloping the Army of Northern Virginia. The day ends with Hooker confident in his positions. However, late that night, Stonewall Jackson would lead his corps around the entire Union Army, positioning himself in the woods off the Orange Turnpike. At the rear of the Union line was Oliver Howard and his 11th Corps, who were being held in reserve as well. It was believed the forests to the west and north were too thick to move troops through, so they had lax defenses facing the west. The morning of the 2nd, they had no concern of an attack until early in the morning when 30,000 men charged from those same woods. The Union were at the time fielding about 108,000 men, but the sneak attack had routed most of the 11th Corps. Even as many of them attempted to hold off the Southerners. Hooker, in shock at his headquarters as it became filled with thousands of 11th Corps soldiers, he would command John Reynolds to abandon his posturing in front of Fredericksburg, to come and help secure the right flank of the army. On May 3rd, Hooker would pull Meade from his combat against Longstreet to plug the gap between Reynolds and Sickles. Now he had formed a wedge-shaped defense with Reynolds anchored right on the Rapidan and Howard and his reformed corps holding the left of the Rappahannock. As the day progressed, Slocum and Couch fell into line with the other corps, making a stronger defense against the wave of Confederate assaults. Sedgwick now made a push at Fredericksburg to threaten the Southern assault from the rear. Jubal Early would pull back, but Longstreet would send McLaws to plug Plank Road near Salem Church to stop the 6th Corps from breaking through. On the 4th, reality set in as the Army of the Potomac was being whipped. Hooker refused at first to retreat, not accepting defeat, but as moments passed, a large mass of troops began to break. Anderson and Early had also come to McLaws' aid, trapping Sedgwick in the 6th Corps southwest of Maury's Heights. Hooker finally accepted his defeat. The 6th Corps would withdraw on May 5th, back across the Rappahannock. Then the following day on the 6th, Hooker and the remaining corps withdrew across the Rappahannock as well. Lee would enter Chancellorsville to thousands of cheering soldiers, having defeated an army 2 times his own size. In the north, it was humiliation. Hooker, who was believed to be the man who would strike hard into the South, was not only defeated, but defeated by an extremely inferior army. This battle would launch Lee as an Olympian figure in not only the South, but even in the North, making many believe the old man was truly undefeatable. 2nd Corps Commander Darius Couch resigned in disgust of Hooker, which would force Hooker to raise a McClellan favorite, Winfield Scott Hancock, to command the 2nd Corps. The following month, Robert E. Lee would invade the North again, this time using the Blue Ridge Mountains to cover his army's movements. Hooker originally didn't actually want to pursue. He in some way correctly assessed that he could strike hard to Richmond and allow the state militias to deal with Lee. But Lincoln would, without hesitation, veto that plan and order him to pursue Lee into the North. His main objective was to protect the federal capital at Washington and the large city of Baltimore. So he sent his corps down the roads of Maryland to the west of both cities. If they would engage, they would quickly be able to concentrate all forces. But confidence in the army, government, and public for Hooker had died down. Hooker demanded that the garrison at Harper's Ferry be given to his forces. When denied the request, he offered his resignation in protest. Imagine his shock when Lincoln would actually accept it on June 27, 1863. Lincoln would then send a provost marshal, an early form of a military police, to the 5th Corps headquarters to command, not offer, command George Meade to take command of the army or resign his commission. Meade would accept. Now, we have a whole series on what happened next, so that can be found in one of our playlists. I'll put the link, as always. Hooker was not a terrible general. It was just he became a little overconfident in his capabilities. Chancellorsville is still known as Lee's greatest victory, but it will be followed by his greatest defeat. Thanks for watching, friends. I hope you enjoyed. I do plan to do a more in-depth video on Chancellorsville. And like I said, Hooker's episode will be on Monday. Thanks for all the support. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.